The night before Al Gore went to bed, the night before he invented the internet, this was the show he dreamed of. It's the Fifth Mascot, only on WCPO.com. We're on every Thursday live at 1:30. Please welcome back Mr. Satin. He's back today in full regalia. And a very special guest today is John Erardi, the moral and social conscience of Cincinnati sports journalism. And if you're wondering about Mike Cannon, he's no longer with us. Now, at least
Today.
this week.
At least this week.
Right. Let's talk about the Reds in the last week. I was so excited when they went out to New York. They're playing the Mets. The Mets stink. But all of a sudden, the Mets roll out two guys that aren't even household names in their own households, and they wind up losing all three. Game 1, they lose. Game 2 and 3, they lose on the same day. So, John, how could you go to New York, lose to the Mets, and be thought of realistically on any level as a contender?
Well, you definitely can't. I mean, bright lights, big city. If you can't play then, forget about it. We've said this a long time about this team. Might be time to sell.
Sell it, baby. Cueto goes what? He goes 6, just 2 earned runs. They can't get any runs in that game from Satin. And then you're figuring they're playing 2, right? They're playing 2 games on Sunday. They get rained out on Saturday. They're playing 2 on Sunday. You got to win one of those 2. It's 1-1.
Yeah, I mean,
you can't get another run.
It felt like a doubleheader, and you know, they came out, they put guys on base again, and what happens? He can't get anyone home. I don't understand that. Cueto just can't get any run support. I mean,
this Matz guy that the Mets has,
man.
Steven Matz. Why can't the Reds get somebody like him?
You know what? A scout for the Reds told me a few years ago. His name was Johnny Alvarez. He says, "How come whenever we trade for somebody else's pitchers, they're better than our guys?" And that has long been the case here. It's not recently the case, but nobody is deeper in pitching than the New York Mets.
They got and then the other guy, the Norwegian legend. What's his name? Guard. He was wonderful.
Yeah, like I say, they're so deep. If the Reds wanted to make a trade, that'd be the first organization I would look at, because this team is not in as bad a shape as we think, and it's all because they've got pretty good young pitching here.
Okay, I want to get to that in a second. Then they play the Twins. Leak wins the first game. Desclafani loses the second game. And then Cueto is just lights out in Game 3. Satin, is that the last game Johnny Cueto pitches as a Cincinnati Red?
Oh, you know, I don't want to say yes, but it's looking that way. But I feel like we're going to hold it together until after the All-Star break before they start selling. I feel like they should have, if they were going to do it, they should have done it last year, right? But it seems like his stock's gone down a little bit. I don't know. He's still out there doing it, but
you know what? Here's
he's a master. But
John and I talked about this on Sports of All Sorts last week. The longer you stick with somebody, particularly with that position, the more you're rolling the dice and playing with fire. He's got something goes on in there in his elbow. Maybe it comes and it goes, but there's something going on there. What are you waiting for at this point?
I would trade him right now if they could. I think ideally the scouts might want one more look at this guy to see if 5 days from now he can pitch just as he did yesterday in what appeared to be his final home outing at Great American Ballpark. I think with Cueto, what they'll probably get in return, since it's a 2-month rental, will probably be a top 50 prospect somewhere in baseball. So it's a decent return, but the question is, how close is that guy to the big leagues?
Right. Well, I mean, top 50 would be pretty good because he's a rent-a player.
Right.
And I think there's a limited number of teams that can sign him, right, after this year?
Absolutely.
I mean, so it's like he's got to go to a team that thinks it has a shot of signing him. If they do, maybe they get a little more back. If it's going to a team that, is maybe just on the come for this year, maybe the Royals, they're probably not going to be able to afford $200 million for Cueto next year.
Right.
So they probably would send less back if that was the case.
Yeah, right? I think that anybody who has a deep farm system is in the market for this guy because, some teams have 2 or 3 players in the top 50. And I think arguably the Reds might get 1 top 50, and if they decide to go to the top 100, they might get 2 top 100s. But to me, that's better than a couple of draft choices.
Okay. Doesn't that come down to how good is Walt Jocketty?
It sure does.
I mean, it's a bargaining prowess that you can find the team that's got something and can give something, right?
Well, if you're going to let Jocketty make these trades, I guess he's back next season. I mean, they let him do the draft this year. And I know all these guys that are down there in the front office, they predated Jocketty. Chris Buckley predated Jocketty. But I'm just wondering if he's making all these trades and he did the draft this year, he's probably back. It would seem to me.
Yeah.
Why would you let him do this stuff if he's not going to be here next year?
Yeah, I think the problem is do we want him here though?
Well, there's only one guy that matters in that equation.
Right. I mean, I think as a fan, you want to see something in return that's a bunch of guys. At least someone can come in and play right now for Cueto. But like you said, I don't know if that's going to be possible right now. Ship keeps kind of going, deeper and deeper.
Was that ship?
The ship. I mean, it could either or.
Matt, it sounds like you don't want Jocketty back here after this year.
Well, when he came, everybody thought it was going to be great because he was the one who sort of, orchestrated the Cardinals, and they were so good. But he has. I don't think he's done much, and it's certainly getting old.
There's a story
whatever he had going is fading away fast.
There's a story up there today. Somebody wrote it that as bad as Jeff Lunau's relationship is with St. Louis, it's worse with Jocketty. And I guess Houston obviously has got a deep minor league system that could probably use a pitcher like Cueto. It would certainly be a rental, but somebody like Cueto that could help them. But if the general managers don't get along, I guess it's.
Well, I mean, the issue with Walt is that he's never done a rebuild, at least not in modern memory. Walt's forte is making the late season acquisition, somebody that's a little bit off the radar, maybe a little bit off his normal back of the baseball card type production, and he'll fit that guy in. The guy gets a new lease on life. But that's not what you need here. You need probably 3 or 4 more players, and I think the only 2 guys you probably won't see go are Frazier and probably Votto, because nobody wants Votto at that price. But other than that, I think everybody's fair game.
Well, the Mets have been rumored as a partner for Frazier, but I think if they traded Todd Frazier, they're doing a couple of things. One, that's really infuriating the fan base. 2, they got nobody in the system that's going to play third base in the foreseeable future. And 3, he's young and he's relatively cost controllable. He's going to hit free agency in a couple of years, but he's still cost controllable. I think they'd be out of their mind to even think about dealing him.
I do too. Not only is he, in my mind, the face of the franchise, but he's the one guy, along with Votto, who I would say you could foresee the next great Reds team in 2 or 3 years having them on it. And that's always the rule of thumb on who you trade. If that guy can be part of the next great Reds team, keep him. If he can't, unload him.
We have great graphics today. I want to point that out. We have we call this a side-by-side in the business. Is that right, Matt? A side-by-side? Brian Pena and
yes.
Devin Mesoraco?
Oh, we're working on that. I thought you wanted to talk about Brian because he's our graphics operator, and I was trying to show that to the fans.
Right. That's D. Trent Rosecrans. That's Trent's brother over
Looking
there.
good.
Yeah, no, he is our graphics guy.
There you go.
But there you go. This is called a side-by-side. And these guys have been filling in for Devin Mesoraco, and honestly, other than the power numbers, they're not hitting the ball all that poorly, and they're getting on base. I don't think either one of them adds up to what Mesoraco does, but it's not like it's a lost position, John.
No, it's actually been pretty good. I mean, typically with Brian Pena, you'll look at the end of the season, he'll revert to his baseball card. So no matter how productive he looks at a certain point, you have to realize he's not a starting catcher. Tucker Barnhart has been a very pleasant surprise. Nobody thought this guy would hit like this, and the fact that he has lessened the blow of losing Mesoraco. I don't think this team is in it, even with Mesoraco healthy.
No. But I think if you're looking ahead, I don't think Payne is here next year. But if Barnhart's your backup catcher, that's not a bad deal if Mesoraco can play.
Correct. Most teams in baseball would take Tucker Barnhart as a number 2 catcher.
That's what I would do right now. I'd get Tucker. Probably a nice guy, but let's move him now. He's hot.
Sure, whoever's got
he's been on the move.
Whoever's got value.
I just like Brian. I like Brian Pena. I think again, I feel like if we invest in him, keep him around, he's one of these guys that you could see him coaching someday. So I like the fact that he's here and helping the young guys out. Bilingual, all that good stuff.
Right.
I don't think they can. I think Votto's got a no trade. I think he's got a no. So you can't trade him. But anybody else, I just throw out there, and I would throw Frazier in that mix. What do you got for me? And if it knocks your socks off, fine. Because this team in 2012, and everybody harkens back to 2012, and what a year they had. They weren't good enough in 2012.
Right.
So they didn't get better. They stood still and they got worse. But the core group wasn't good enough in 2012. And was that the year that every pitcher made his start, or was that 13?
Every year but one, 2012. Had one guy.
Actually,
nobody missed the start. One guy was called in for a doubleheader.
Right.
But
wow.
The point of the matter is the ship has sailed on this team because one would have thought they would have won deeply in the playoffs by now. The fact that they haven't tells me they're probably 3 years away from making it to the playoffs again.
I agree, and I think this whole thing about waiting till the All-Star game, nobody cares about that. Because the same problems you got before the All-Star game, you're going to have after the All-Star game if you don't deal with them. And you're playing with fire with Leak, with Chapman, and with Cueto because they all pitch.
Well,
they're one good strained flexor muscle away from being absolutely worthless.
And I think people are getting used to the fact that this. I think maybe at the beginning they won those first 4 games. Cincinnati Homer fans, they were hoping and praying. I think everybody's sort of used to it. We're 15 games out now, and I don't think many people have much hope that they're going to do anything. I mean, so I just think I was thinking they'd wait till after the All-Star game, but I don't think they'd disappoint many people if they started doing it now.
And look at the black surrounding you back there. I mean, it's kind of like you've already pressed the thing in crate back there, man.
Well, we're just Brian's just sort of a dark guy. He's like Johnny Cash. That's what that is.
Is that what he is?
Yeah, it's just his
with a beard.
We love D. Trent. Satin, you weren't even born when this happened.
When what happened?
I don't know what he's talking about.
Wearing black cash?
No. When Pete Rose got banned from baseball.
Oh, I was around.
You were?
I was somewhere.
Really?
Yeah, I was probably playing Pee Wee something or other.
Pete Rose, new allegations. John and I are veterans on this Pete Rose thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
new allegations.
Taft?
Huh?
Are you going to the Taft to talk?
I might go, yeah. I've seen
I'd
that
like to
show.
see
It's a
that.
good show.
Yeah?
It's a good show.
I'd like to see that.
But more allegations with Pete this week, and the fact that there is documentation apparently out there that ESPN acquired that shows that he bet while a player. I don't think that changes the narrative at all for Pete Rose, do you?
No, it doesn't for me. I've said before that I think the real dagger in the heart would be betting against his team, which is what Joe Jackson did. Unless Pete has done that, he's not totally dead. But we're talking about increments here because I think we all probably agree that reinstatement bid is a real long shot.
I think, it's almost like, I don't think he ever works again in baseball. I just don't think that. I think that was a pipe dream from I don't know where. But I think what happens is I could see Manfred at some point say, like Pontius Pilate, I wipe my hands of this situation and I give him to the masses. And the masses, no offense, would be the baseball writers who would then decide whether or not he gets in. Now, there's some conjecture, would he go in front of the writers or the Veterans Committee? And I think you could make an argument for the writers, but it might be the Veterans Committee. But I think either way, he doesn't get in his lifetime. I think there's enough writers out there, and there's certainly enough members of that Veterans Committee that don't let him get into the Hall of Fame under any circumstances while he's still on this side of the grass.
They make it 75% for a reason. That's a very high threshold. 3 out of every 4 votes are necessary. The present Hall of Fame board believes the writers have had their shot because the 15-year window has told on Rose. He now goes before the Veterans Committee. As a baseball writer, I would argue we never got our shot.
Right.
He was never on our ballot. Let's get a shot at him. Even Shoeless Joe Jackson was on the ballot for a while. He never got anywhere near enough votes, but at least he got considered by the writers.
You think there's 75% vote out there for Rose right now?
Heck no, not even among the veterans, because one thing I've concluded after watching these veterans every year, they don't want anybody in the Hall of Fame except them.
Right.
I swear to God, that's the truth.
The old school baseball players, everybody who's really old school doesn't want him at all. They're still used to. They were old enough that when their dad told them about Shoeless Joe Jackson, and they know why the commissioner was brought into the game completely. I think younger writers think, what are you guys so worried about? He's not going to hurt anybody at this point, and he was one of the greatest players of all time.
But if there's not enough veterans there, okay?
Right. John, do you know, John, how that? I guess it would become up to the commissioner how he would be treated. Would he become a first-time ballot player, or would he have to go? Do we even know how that would be treated?
15 years past.
Yeah, I mean,
well, but some of the rules are that you get 5 years or 15 years on the ballot, and then you're expired.
Right.
But since he's never been on the ballot, I don't know if he's like a player who's just been out of the game for 5 years. I don't know.
I mean, I'll tell you what the present Hall of Fame board thinks is that he's had his shot because his clock ran with us. While he was under suspension, he should have been on our ballot. He wasn't. He therefore goes before the Veterans Committee. I think you'll see an impassioned plea by the writers to get him on our ballot, but I don't think we get 75% either place because it's just so difficult to get 3 out of 4 votes. Matt's point is absolutely correct. The old guard doesn't want this guy in. The big issue isn't so much Pete, it's the 40 guys standing behind him on Hall of Fame induction day. If they can't get all those guys to come back, they're not going to put him on the ballot. There's somewhat of a demarcation line between baseball and the Hall of Fame board. It's a very blurry line. They're almost one and the same, but they do act independently, believe it or not.
Let me ask you a question, because this has bugged me, and it's probably I'm operating under wrong information, and if I am, it's never happened before. But if in 1991, the Hall said that anyone that's on baseball's banned list can't be considered for the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Okay. Why at that point was there not a great uprising among the baseball writers to tell the Hall of Fame, you're not going to tell us how we go about our business. We should be able to vote for anyone we want to, and if you're going to impose that rule, then we're taking our voting away from you, and you just go ahead and select whoever you want. Why did that not happen?
There was a reaction, including by guys like myself writing columns. Unfortunately, in the phrase of Michael Lewis, the Baseball Writers Association is the equivalent of the Ladies Auxiliary in almost any corporation. We have no clout at all, and baseball just basically trampled over our rights to have him on our ballot.
Wow.
And I think that was an injustice, and that needs to be corrected. If he's going to be reinstated, put him on our ballot. Let him get his 10 years of consideration.
Yeah, because if they, it's kind of like you got kicked out of a club, or you were in a club and they said, you can still belong to this club, but now here's some new rules, and they infringe upon your rights, your power as a baseball writer. If indeed the baseball writers don't participate in this, then the Hall's got to say, okay, you're in, and all that becomes then is a museum.
Correct,
Right.
and I think the shame of it is that Rose, who in my mind, and we've talked about this, is not only a good ambassador for the game, he's the best baseball has at talking the game. And I don't see any harm in separating him from his on-the-field duties, in which case he can't be a manager again. Put him in the Hall. What harm would that do, including the last 20 years had he been in? What would have been the great harm? Let me tell you this. Pete Rose looks mighty good right now compared to Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Sammy Sosa. I mean, I don't think baseball would have any great problem with Pete in the Hall. I think they'd have a problem with the steroid guys in the Hall.
You know, Satin, I don't think he wants to be in the Hall. I think he makes more money being an outlaw than one of the boys. I do.
Well,
I really
that's
think.
a great point.
Well, now he's on TV.
Yeah. But you got to love, I mean, everybody, it's not just Cincinnati anymore. I think everyone sort of this blue-collar mentality, rallying around Pete Rose, give him a shot, knowing that he's never had a shot. Let the fans have a campaign to just talk about this. Let's have a conversation about getting past all this stuff. I mean, that was no news to us. We all knew he bet on baseball, bet on, the big dagger. He starts betting, those stubs come up that he bet on his own team. I mean, he's gone. But right now, you got to give him a campaign.
He always bet on his team.
Yeah,
he didn't bet against his team.
But
you know what I was surprised?
Against
Right, and I agree with you. I thought Cincinnati was always going to back him, but we had this the poll on WCPO.com, and only 43% of the people said he should still be reinstated, which I was surprised at that.
But you know, here's.
I mean, I would have thought it would be 70 or plus.
Yeah, but it would be on the west side.
Yeah, but I love the internet.
The internet was out that day.
I love the internet, and I like polls. But we're talking about people that were, let's just say you were a fan of Pete Rose and you were 40 years old back in 1985, okay? You're now 30 years down the road. You're 70. You're not on the internet participating in a poll right now.
Right.
Well,
so
I would
this kind of skews younger, and I think there are a lot of people that only know him from highlight films.
But wouldn't you think younger people wouldn't care even more? I mean, I would think younger people
They don't
are
know him. I don't think they know. I think Pete Rose is irrelevant to a lot of people that are under 40. To be honest with you.
Right, and I'm with John. I didn't even know they made a distinction. I didn't realize it was that the fact that he bet on baseball as a manager, and that makes it different than if you bet on baseball as a player. Either way, you have an effect on the outcome of the game.
What about your conversation with John Dowd? Didn't you do John had to relate the conversation that you related to me that you had with John Dowd.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I'll say is that in spring training of 1985, I was starting to do a book on Pete Rose. I went down to Thonotosassa, Florida, talked to Laverne Nath, Pete's mother, who told me off the record that Pete had, quote, lost the bundle on the Padres in the 1984 World Series. That's when I knew. That's when I knew everything Pete said for the next 20 years was a bunch of baloney. There's one person you don't want against you. It's your mother. Ask Jeb Bush. But my other point about we were talking about Pete. I think what was the question again?
No, you mean you talked
to John Dowd.
Yes, I met Dowd on the street outside Norbert Nadel's Hamilton County Common Pleas Court. On the witness stand, John had testified Pete bet on baseball on his team in 1985. Outside the courthouse, I said, Dowd, are you telling me that Rose was betting on his team in 1985 when he was a player? And John said, yes, that's true. And I said, well, to me, that changes everything, not knowing I was going to have a crystal ball. That's a huge issue for him getting in the Hall of Fame. It has no demarcation for actually whether or not he belongs back in baseball, because Dowd's point, and he said it recently, as 2 weeks ago, if you bet as a manager or as a player, it doesn't matter. Right. You still bet. You're out of the game. So it's a fine point, but still, to Mr. Satin's point about let's put it up to the hoi polloi, the proletariat, the masses, I think it makes a huge difference to a lot of people that Pete was not pure as a player. However, the big difference between the steroids guys, Rose's numbers are all pure. You can't say that for Bonds or Clemens.
Number one, he's the hit king.
Yeah. Yep. You can't bet your way to 4,000 hits.
Correct.
No, you can't. But I find the whole process, the Dowd Commission, what the Hall of Fame did in '91, and the only player they were targeting was Rose. Right. There was no one else they were targeting. And now where we are today with all this, it seems to me that not in his lifetime, in our lifetime, we're probably not going to see resolution to this issue. I think this thing is good. I think this is the modern day version of Shoeless Joe Jackson.
You're absolutely correct. The interesting thing to me, Mr. Satin definitely is too young to remember this or know this, even though he might protest, is Pete Rose, he never wanted into the Hall of Fame. That's a very recent occurrence. What he wanted was to be back in baseball and managing, and why? Because of this. It's the same reason I don't think he really cares that much about the Hall even now. He wants it for his family and friends, but what he wants the $1 million he's making a year in Vegas signing autographs.
Baseball's still making money off of him right now.
Well,
he's not getting a dime of that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
no, baseball trots him out anytime it suits baseball. And that's like the 2000 or the '99 celebration of the All-Century team, and then whenever it benefits them financially.
Well, I don't know.
Michael Jackson or something.
That's just something they can't avoid. Whenever they put a vote, like with this first, what is it, the franchise 4?
Yeah.
I mean, they can't get around it. If you put something up to, if you put it up to who is some of the best players of all time, and you're going to honor those people, Pete's going to be on the list. Right. Even the writers would admit that. They wouldn't put him in the Hall of Fame maybe, but they can't deny he's one of the best players.
Well, pressing on, let's deal with a little history here, because this week we celebrate another history. July the 2nd, 2013. Homer Bailey threw his second no-hitter in his career. And at that point, Walt Jocketty fell in love with Homer Bailey. It was like before then. It might have been a casual relationship, but this was all love. And Bob Castellini performed the service that brought Homer Bailey, Walt Jocketty, and Bob Castellini's money together to give him a 6-year, $105 million contract. How are we doing on that one? Not good.
Well, not good. And the point is, it wasn't so much just Homer Bailey alone. At that time, Mr. Castellini was spending money like he had it. Between Votto and Bailey, and the worst contract of all, to my mind, Mr. Satin, Brandon Phillips, who was already on the downturn when that contract occurred. You want to spend money on a middle infielder, don't spend it when he's over age 30. So I think it was a matter of all of a sudden Mr. Castellini's getting smart. He realizes he may have to supervise the breakdown of his team, but I think personally he's ready to do that because he recognizes this team as is, even with a tweak or two, can't compete for a postseason berth. He has to do an overhaul.
With regards to Bailey, he signed that deal. He's now his third year into that deal. I think he's pitched a grand total of like 3 months in that deal. He's not going to pitch again till the middle of next season. I think it highlights two things. One, I don't think you give long-term contracts to pitchers. I mean, if it's me, it's 4 years max. If that's not good enough for you, ask the lumbago. Secondly, I think they might have backed the wrong horse. I mean, if you look at it right now, who would you rather have on your team next year pitching for you, Homer Bailey or Johnny Cueto?
Right.
Well, that's true. The only thing I would caution you, there's a little bit of hindsight involved because I think at the time, Mr. Castellini felt that if he signed these guys to big contracts, more and more people would come to the ballpark that get to the postseason, maybe win a world championship. He'd have more money to spend. Unfortunately, two of his biggest investments, Joey Votto and Homer Bailey, Votto, who arguably was headed for the Hall of Fame at the time of his signing, no longer is because he's getting a little bit older, not quite as productive. And, of course, Bailey, no question, in hindsight, the wrong horse. You'd almost rather have Mike Leake right now than Homer Bailey.
Yeah.
Leake eats innings, and Bailey remains on the side at least till the middle of next year. But that's a little bit of Ritz history.
But BP, though, hey, he's, you say he's past his prime. That guy is better than anybody up the gut right there.
You raise a great point.
Tell you what, I love him.
I think there was a point where you thought beginning the season, horrible contract. He has come on, not with a lot of power, but He's a pretty productive Red right now.
he's-
I'll give you that.
Between him and Frazier faced the franchise and probably made the Reds more money than anybody on that team in PP.
Yeah.
So,
Did you see that play he made about a week ago when it hit the mound and he threw it behind his back and
Yes.
then turned the double play?
Yeah, it was
I've seen him make a lot of good
ridiculous.
plays. That was one of the best ones I've ever seen. It hit the mound, then it almost hit the ump. The ump ducks his head, so he falls over catching it because he didn't know where it was coming from, and he flips it behind his back and they turn a double play.
That one and the one, I guess 2 seasons ago, where he's taken a throw in from the left fielder. He's got his back to first base, gets the ball. The guy slides between his legs and he tags the guy in his face. To me, that was like, I love that.
the face and butt face right there. That was great.
What do you think? I mean, I know that you don't get along with Mike Cannon, but I mean,
Mike and I had a
John's
brawl.
doing pretty good here, huh?
Pro.
Yeah.
He's one of the best, man.
Absolutely, it's
Right
unbelievable.
there.
Unbelievable. Well, let's look ahead. National League Central Division standings. It's getting worse as we speak.
Yeah, we may not need to look at this
Five
much longer.
below 500, but 15 games out of first. Only because the Cardinals, everything happens to that team. Injury, federal indictments. It doesn't matter. They're still the best team in baseball.
To be 25 games over 500 at this point in the season is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I hate
It's
them.
just ridiculous.
But here's the headline. The Cardinals, the Pirates, and the Cubs for the next 3 to 5 years are going to be really, really good. That's the bad news for the Reds. And their farm system is, the Reds system is really, really not good. So I think that's the bigger headline than being 15 back at this point.
You know what we need? We need like the rock and jock, like big softball pitch where we hit it and we get like 10 games up. Like if Frazier were to win home run derby, they should just spot us like 5 or 6 games.
Right.
You know, why not?
Frazier, Satin was a big fan of batting Frazier like what? 4 times in a game.
Yeah,
once.
like
that would
1
be
through
nice.
8.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Wild card
Ghost
standings,
man.
everybody got all geek last week. Well, they fall another half game behind on the wild card, and oh my goodness, look who's leading the wild card race: Pittsburgh and Chicago. So, I don't see that as a doable thing. I think Baseball Prospectus had them as percentage making the playoffs now at 3.1% this week. So I don't think that's happening, and maybe that reality is sinking in with Bob Castellini, John, at this point.
Well, we'll say one thing, and we'll see if Mr. Satin agrees with me. This is actually one of the most exciting 36 and 41 teams I've ever seen. And why do I say that? You've got Hamilton stealing bases now. You've got
It is fun to see
Chapman
him on
coming in and closing games. The young pitching is good. Brandon Phillips is making those great plays at second base. It seems almost crazy that this team is out of it.
Yeah.
For the money, it's still a pretty good investment to go down and watch this team play.
Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of, I would not have thought that these young kids come up would be anything. But I tell you what, Suarez,
He's terrible.
I love Suarez.
terrible.
No way. I
Bad
love his
fielder.
bat.
He
Bad
can't
field,
field.
good hitter.
He
Yeah,
cannot
that's true.
field. I like watching him hit the ball,
Oh,
but he
yeah.
cannot field. He was part of the reason they lost that 13-inning game that took 2 days.
He's kind of a
This is
modern-day
true.
version
There's just
of
a ground
Easy
ball
Edwin.
to him, and he just dropped
Right.
it. I mean, he's got like 7 errors, and he's been up for like a month.
Yeah, I think in about 5 years he'll be a DH in the American League.
Yeah.
I think he's like easy.
They were
With
talking.
Mesoraco.
John Fay was talking the other night on the radio how, and this is true, when Barry Larkin came up, he made a ton of errors.
Yeah, he
and
did.
I remember when Barry Larkin came up, I wanted him to keep Kurt Stillwell because he didn't make as many errors.
There were a lot of people
See how that
felt
worked
way.
out.
Castro up in
But yeah,
Chicago,
he
he's
makes
the
way
same
too
way.
many errors. I mean, he hits 300, but
Yeah.
I can't stand it when he keeps just dropping the ball.
Yeah, no, that's. But your point about an exciting team.
Yeah.
I think Hamilton's on track right now to steal 85, 86. He's not going to get to 130, but if he could ever hit, maybe with
Yeah.
pitching he might.
Right. They said
can bunt.
he might set the team record for steals
Yeah.
at the All-Star break, and he's hitting 220.
He has more steals right now than half of the Major League Baseball teams have combined. He has more steals than 15 teams in this league have combined.
Well, we'll see if everybody on this august panel agrees with me. That's the one guy I would like to see blossom in Cincinnati. I'd like to see him become a bona fide major league leadoff hitter. The question is, can he ever become that? And if anybody wanted to give you value in return, you'd have to trade him. But my gosh, if you got to unload Aroldis Chapman, which clearly they do, you would like a little more excitement to be left with this team. And Billy Hamilton is Mr. Excitement.
When you're at the game, when he gets on base, it's fun.
Oh,
Absolutely.
sure.
You just watch. You're like, watch, he's going to go.
But he's only getting on base 28%.
How do you get that up? How do you get his average up?
Preface the whole thing by when he gets on base. But when he gets on, I mean, I was at a game a couple weeks ago. He got on the first 2 times, and he scored. He was on third in like a couple of pitches, and then they hit a ground ball, and he's in.
Well, he pops the ball up every time. It's like, how do you, it's like Major League. You need to stop and give him 20 line drives. How do you get him to that point?
Well, it's not so much his batting average as it is having a more discerning eye, so he'll get on base, as Matt says, so he can give you the chance to steal a base. Right now, as Ken says, 28% on base percentage. That's 50% off where it should be. He's got to be at least 330 to be effective in the leadoff hole.
And my suggestion has always been he hits better from the right side of the plate. Yeah. I would say let's concentrate on that. You're going to get more reps in the cage that way. I mean, it's great that you can switch hit. I think that's a step down the road of making him better. But you can't win. This team can't win with Billy Hamilton batting ninth. I get the metrics about having it's like having another leadoff hitter, and it makes Votto and it makes Frazier and whoever bats second more lethal because they'll have a guy on base 28% of the time at least. But you don't win with him batting ninth.
It annoys me just because Tony La Russa used to do it.
Well, you know what? If Dusty Baker was the manager here, it would have never happened.
That's
Dusty
for sure.
would have just keep ramming him right in there at that first spot.
Nobody's as by the book as Dusty Baker was.
And nobody hates La Russa more than that.
Absolutely.
So up next for the Reds, it's 3 against the Brewers coming up in a rip-roaring series at Great American Ballpark, and then they hit the bricks to finish out the rest of the way before the All-Star break at the Nationals and at the Marlins. Let's talk a little bit about Lorenzino, who I think of all the young pitchers, John, and I throw Desclafani in that, and even Iglesias. I think Lorenzino is, to me, the best of the young bunch. I really think this guy's upside is just terrific.
Well, they say he's basically Mike Leake with a 95-mile-an-hour fastball.
Wow.
That's a pretty good combination. I personally am very fond of Iglesias. I know that he's down in AAA.
Oh, my God, don't say that. Ken's going to start to sing.
Yeah, I mean, Iglesias.
For all the girls I love.
There you go.
Before.
There you go.
I had to do it. And you mentioned Leake with a fastball. And he's cost efficient. I like Iglesias. I like Desclafani. The kid that's pitching Saturday night, Smith, looks like he's just up here because they needed a warm body.
Right.
But if they could ever get Stevenson to a point where they could push him along to AAA, now all of a sudden you're talking about some really good young pitching.
And Hand, where's he at? He was up here for half an inning. He looked killer. Big, huge breaking ball.
Yeah.
Get him back up here.
So I think you're right. I think they've got to get some answers in left field, which has been a black hole. They're going to have to get some answers at catcher, whether or not the kid can play. They're going to have to figure out a successor for Brandon Phillips. And they're going to have to get Billy Hamilton hitting. And they're going to have to figure out, is Jay Bruce the answer to this to whatever problem this team has long term? And I think those are the questions that can't wait till the All-Star break. I think you got to admit it ain't working. It's not going to work next year. Let's look realistically at 2017 and say, okay, can we legitimately win then? And if we can, then who among these players are going to be here in 17? And I think that's the conversation they need to be having right now.
You're right. Every if you mentioned was every if going into this season. The only one you didn't mention was, can Todd Frazier repeat? He's more than repeated. The problem was all these other guys didn't come through. The great issue for me is Jay Bruce, because he's not quite the kind of guy who's going to bring you top value in return, because he's been off, but he's still a very good player. Unless you can package him and get a big piece in return, you almost got to throw the dice on this guy and stick with him, because right now, by himself, he will not get you the return that he's probably worth.
Yeah, his price, he's actually kind of been a surprise. I mean, I've been hating on him for a couple of years now, but his defense still is there. I mean, he doesn't cost as much. You're right, the dice. I'm into it. I was hating on him before, but let him retire here. He's getting up there in age. Why not?
All right, I want to go around the room. Well, let's go around the room. We'll start with D. Trent. I want to go around the room. Tell me the first guy that gets traded.
Cueto, probably.
Okay. Matt?
I think Chapman. But I think Chapman is just very sexy, and a team will want him, and you would get something for him. But I think that's the easier trade to make. That's why I think it's first.
Rusty?
I agree with Chapman. We've been saying that on Sports of All Sorts for weeks, and I think that he's their going to get the most for him.
Chris, he's got a year and a half to go. What do you think, Satin?
Well, I'd like to see Chapman go first. I don't think he will, though. I think everyone's gunning for Cueto. I think they're, like you said earlier, they're waiting for one more start, and I think he's gone.
Cueto only because Chapman won't bring any more in return despite being under contract for another year. They're both going to bring probably a top 50 prospect. Most teams in baseball correctly, unlike this one, value a starting pitcher much more than a closer. That's why I think Cueto brings more value and will be traded first.
I'm going to go against the grain, which might be surprising. I think the first guy that goes is Mike Leake. I think Mike Leake at $9.7 million, probably can sign him next year, $12 million, maybe on a 4 or 5 year deal. I think Mike Leake is extremely attractive, particularly to a smaller market team like Kansas City. They can trade for him and then stand a shot of signing him. And if it's a New York team that goes after him, he'd be the ultimate bargain. I think New York needs help. The Yankees, Kansas City needs help. Dodgers need help. They're all, Kansas City isn't, but New York and LA are big market teams. I think they can afford to trade for Lake and then sign him long term.
It's very interesting because everybody's focusing on Cueto, as Mr. Satin said. What about Leake? If you want a guy who every fifth day is going to take the ball and give you innings, the only thing about Mike is that there are times where if he doesn't have his stuff, he's still smart and good, but if he doesn't have his stuff, he can get lit up. That almost never happened to Cueto. But it's an interesting case. As soon as the Reds get value in return for either of those guys, they're gone. If Leake gets the return first, he'll be first to go.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. We're done. That is the fifth mascot for this Thursday. Who knows who will be on this team when we reconvene next week, which, by the way, begins All-Star Week here in Cincinnati.
Excited.
Are we ready for the carnival that's coming to town?
Let's do it.
I hope they have rides, games of chance, and cotton candy, because that's all I'm really interested in. They could keep the home run derby in the game. Cotton candy gets me home.
Man, let me tell you something. It's all about the circus, and we got a big one coming to town.
That's the fifth mascot. We're available 24/7 on WCPO.com. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.